Well, we're going to study the book of Romans. Now, you may wonder why we call it the book of Romans, because the Bible is a book. So how come we have books and books? Well, in the last 2,000 years, we've had two major kinds of books. One is a scroll. A scroll is kind of like a rolled up piece of paper where they wrote on it, and then you unroll it to read it. The second type is what we call a codex. A codex is what we think of a book. It has pages and chapters and all that. In the first century, they only used scrolls. So the whole Bible was written on scrolls. Romans was written on a scroll. Well, how do you translate the word scroll? Well, you translate it as book. So it was the scroll of Romans translated to the book of Romans. Now, at the end of the first century, Christians started pushing for codexes. So they would take all the scrolls of the New Testament and the Old Testament and put them into a codex, what we would think of as a book. And so therefore, what we call the Bible today is a book containing books. One thing to understand before we get going is in the first century, the Roman Empire had a fantastic set of roads. They built it for their military so that they could move an army from one area of the empire to another very quickly. But it was also very useful for commerce. It means it was very easy to do trade over the whole Roman Empire. So trade flourished. But it also meant that communications among the different areas of the Roman Empire became pretty easy. Believe it or not, this has an impact on the book of Romans. This passage is about Pentecost. People from all over the Roman Empire came to Jerusalem. Many of them were at Pentecost and saw the miracles. But more than that, as they were visiting their friends and relatives in Jerusalem, they heard about this man that was going through the countryside performing miracles. They would have also heard that this man was executed on the cross. I'm sure that they were very curious about this, and they carried the news back to their homes all around the empire. So in synagogues all over the empire, people heard about Jesus, and they were very curious about the events. This is why Paul, when he went to a new city, always stopped by the synagogue, because he had a ready-made audience. They really wanted to know about this news of Jesus. But it wasn't just all the cities of the empire. Rome itself heard about these events. We know from Roman historians that the Emperor Claudius kicked all the Jews out of Rome because they were fighting and arguing about a man called Christus. Now, apparently the Roman historian thought that was his name and not his title. But it's curious that on the other side of the Roman Empire, less than 20 years after the crucifixion, the emperor of the entire Roman Empire kicked the Jews out of Rome because they were arguing about a man called Christus. I once heard a man say that there was no proof that Jesus existed. He apparently didn't do a lot of research, because this is pretty darn strong proof that Jesus existed. What we see in this passage is that even when Christ was alive, nobody knew what to make of him. Was he John the Baptist? Was he Elijah? Or was he just a prophet? I think this is the same thing that was going on in Rome. Nobody knew quite what to make of him. Who was he? This passage explains why the Jews were expecting Elijah to come before the Messiah. The problem is that this passage refers to the second coming and not the first coming. There are two events that are confused by many Christians. The one is the tribulation, and the other is the day of the Lord. The tribulation is Satan punishing the godly. The day of the Lord is God punishing the ungodly. The day of the Lord is compared to the days of Noah and Sodom. The passage here is referring to the day of the Lord, where the Messiah will return and punish the ungodly. There is a warning here. The Jews didn't recognize that Jesus was the Messiah because he didn't fulfill the prophecies in the way that they expected. We need to make sure that we don't make that same mistake. So, when Jesus asked what the people thought he was, nobody thought he was the Messiah. Elijah was a forerunner of the Messiah. John the Baptist said he came to prepare the way for the Messiah. So why didn't they think Jesus was the Messiah? The Messiah was going to be a warrior king. He was going to free the Jews from the foreign nations. And Jesus was talking about peace and love. And that really didn't fit with their idea of a warrior king. However, in the second coming on the day of the Lord, he will return as the warrior king. I'm pretty certain that the fighting in Rome wasn't about whether Jesus was Elijah or John the Baptist or a prophet. It was a little more serious than that. As we can see before the crucifixion, many in Israel thought he got his power from Satan. So part of the argument going on in Rome was whether he was good or evil. In the midst of all this fighting, Paul presents his gospel. And you can imagine how that went over. Period. So the primary purpose of the book of Romans is to defend Paul's gospel against his critics.